Councillors, we might make a start if we could, please. I'd like to welcome you all to the council meeting of Wyndham City Council this Tuesday, 26th of April 2022. And I would like to also acknowledge the traditional owners of the land in which we meet and gather, and pay my respects to the Kulin Nation people and also elders past, present, emerging, and any that may be here tonight. Councillors, if you could stand. I would like to note that we have Councillors Shaw and Gilligan who are accessing the meeting remotely, just so that you may not see them, obviously won't see them in the chamber. We just wanted to let people know that. So if we could please stand for the opening prayer. So we pray for guidance in the Council's decision making to achieve the best outcome for the people of Wyndham. Please be seated.
Mr. Mayor, would you just check to see if the residents sitting in the gallery can hear us, because the last time they were in the gallery no one heard a word we said.
Thank you, Councillor Marcus. Am I being heard okay? Yeah, thumbs up? Thanks, good on you. Thanks very much. I'd like to welcome members of the gallery, press, councillors and staff in attendance this evening, and please note that this meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the internet. The recording will be archived and made available on the Council's website, and whilst all care has been taken to ensure that your privacy is maintained, please be aware that your presence may be recorded. Item 2 on the agenda is apologies and requests for leave of absence. Mr CEO, do we have any apologies or requests for leave of absence?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. No apologies this evening.
Thank you very much. Item 3, declaration by councillors of disclosure of conflict of interest, conflicting personal interest in any item of the agenda. Councillors, does anyone have any conflicts of interest that they wish to declare? Councillor Barrera.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I have a general conflict of interest for one item in item 10.4.
Thank you, Councillor Barrera, and we've structured the agenda such that we can hear that one while you're out of the chamber and then do the rest. So thank you very much. Item 4 on the agenda is confirmation of minutes of previous meeting, and the motion is that the minutes of the council meeting held at 7 p.m. on Tuesday, 22nd March 2022 be prepared, as prepared I should say, and circulated be confirmed. Councillors, can I have a mover please? Councillor Ramesh, seconder please. Councillor McIntyre. Discussion, councillors, on any corrections only? There being none, I put it to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you. The motion is carried. Item 5 is deputations and presentations. 5.1, draft asset plan community consultation. The report is on page 4 to 7 with a recommendation on page 4, attachments page 8 to 79. Councillors and those in the gallery, to ensure council is delivering for our community, we recruited 40 members from the People's Advisory Panel to participate in the deliberative engagement process for the asset plan. The recruited panel members represented a mini Wyndham, if you like, which reflected the diversity of our community, some of who are in the chamber tonight. The deliberative approach for the asset plan saw panel members taken through a series of workshops where they received information about Wyndham, services and assets, deliberated and came back to the council with a report written by themselves. The report developed by the group has been used as an important input to help inform the asset plan. Now it's time to hear from those members of the panel who participated in this important process. So, councillors, I will need a motion to suspend standing orders, please, so we can hear from the panel members. So can I have a councillor move that? Councillor Zakowski, they're moving that standing orders be suspended. A seconder, please. Councillor Mahfood. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. So, to learn more about the process they went through, we are fortunate tonight to have Reese and Cushy here with us tonight to share the reflections. So could I please ask Reese and Cushy to come forward to address the council, please? Reese, I believe you're going first, and then Cushy second.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Hi, my name is Reese, and I had the great opportunity with 40 fellow Wyndham Council members to take part in the asset deliberative process, where we came together over 2 weekends to talk about what we wanted to have a strong, healthy community within Wyndham. And it was a really hard process, challenging process, but rewarding. We found all of us wanted to make Wyndham a stronger community, but the challenge was, what were the services that would actually make Wyndham a stronger community? And that's what we decided or talked about over the last 2 weekends that we were. We wanted and we had lots of people come from lots of different backgrounds. So whether that was from cultural diversity, age, multicultural ability, gender, and sexuality. And I think that was really important to showcase the diversity that we have within Wyndham, and to be able to make sure that we create over this next 10 years a community which is inclusive, and what are the services that will help achieve that process. One of the things that we really wanted Council to focus on was looking at a triple bottom line, so looking at the social, environmental and economic impact of your services. There's a great range of services that you provide to the community. We found it challenging with the tools that we were provided with in terms of, net profit loss, to make decisions about what should be the services that we prioritise and we recommend that you spend more, less, or the same on. So we're thinking by using a framework like that would provide more information to you as councillors, the council staff and the community about the impact of your work having on the broader community. So that way you are able to say this dollar equals this bang for buck in terms of the impact that you're having. We really found this a really rewarding process, and we want Wyndham Council to look at making sure that you have a long-term viable economic growth plan that considers the community future's needs and requirements are met, whilst keeping in mind the efficiency, sustainability and productivity of services that protects the environment from irreversible damage within budget constraints. It was really clear that everyone wanted to have a Wyndham that was sustainable in terms of the environment, acknowledging the changes that COVID-19 has had, climate change, and there is constantly going to be challenges coming forward into the community which we don't know which will be yet, but we wanted to make sure that Council had the processes and the frameworks in place to sort of make sure that Wyndham is better off than we found it, which is a challenging environment, challenging thing in today's environment. We also really wanted to make sure that Council carries out services due diligently and doesn't delegate this to a third party unless it's deemed of a quality service that can improve and be more cost effective. The consideration of restructuring and streamlining could also be where necessary to duplicate any services, or the redeployment of staff to minimise any job losses or advocacy. We really saw that Council is best placed to provide services from the community to the community, and that's what you guys do really well. But sometimes there's someone who's really good at a specific thing that it might be really good to see and consult if they are able to do particular things in that area and utilising their connections to community that are already in place. Next, what we'll do is we'll talk about some of the decisions that were made around what we should spend less, more, or the same in the future. And I'll pass on to my colleague.
Hello, I'm Kushi, and I was one of the panel members as well. And I would like to talk to you guys about what services we thought we would reduce and increase funds for if the budget constraints became tight. So for the services that we thought we could reduce funds for was place management, family sector and partnerships, strategic communications, festivals and events, and lastly, advocacy and intergovernmental relations. And as a panel, an overarching argument that we put forward for why the funds for these services should be reduced for, as most of these services are a duplication of some of the other services that are provided by the council or with other sectors, which ultimately result in similar outcomes for our residents. As well as these funds could be allocated for other purposes when faced with budget constraints to make more effective use of them. However, with advocacy and intergovernmental relationships, there was a little banter about it, as there is a posed risk evaluated by the panel, as there are concerns for this service not providing positive results, even if continuous funds are given to it. And overall, all of these services resulted in not generating significant revenues to offset the expenditure according to the panel, and that was based on the information that was provided to us. Secondly, we discussed about what services we would like to increase the funds for, and we had a few, so I'll list them out for you. So some of them were transports and roads, customer services, child health and well-being, early education and care, green living, waste, youth services, and community strengthening. Same as the other one, we had an overarching argument proposed by the panel as to why we would like to increase the funds for these, as all of these services were identified as being essential services, and without this, the community would eventually fall apart or have some not work properly, as it follows the life of an individual from birth to youth, as most of these services do, such as child health and well-being and the youth services. Overall, these services focuses on managing the standards of the community's well-being and in several aspects, as it improves the quality of life, deal with human impact and activity, and establish a healthy environment for all residents of Wyndham Council. Moreover, for early education and care, youth services, and child and health well-being, were a few of the services that were also supported by the survey that was proposed on the Loop a few months ago prior to the panel that was established. It helped to maintain a healthy city, which would allow all residents to enhance their personal well-beings as well as the community's well-being. And some of the key messages that I would like to get across to you as that were also formed by the panel was, for the services that we said we would like to reduce the funds for, we said the services prompted for reducing funds present the concern for the mismanagement of the funds and prompts the council to reconsider the usage of the funds for more effective services that would cater for the specific needs of the Wyndham people. And lastly, for the services that we said we would like to increase the funds for, some of the key messages that were the services that asked for a raise are in line with maintaining the multicultural and well-being aspect of the community that we pride as the Wyndham Council, which ultimately aim to establish strong bonds between the community members, as well as the service also focused on greener futures such as the green living and waste management. So that was all that I had for why we would like to increase and reduce the funds. Now I'll pass it back to Reese to tell you more about the funds that we would like to keep the same.
Thank you. So it was really hard to decide what to spend less and more on, and our facilitator, Chad, said you should be glad we didn't ask for more money for more things, because it's really hard to sort of say what we should be getting less of, but we were able to find some things that should stay the same. Bear with me. So some of the things we were recommending staying about the same. Sometimes they often had a change in focus. So looking, for example, at animal management, that's one of the areas that you're legislated to do, but we also thought maybe taking, rather than a disciplinary kind of approach, but taking more of an educational based approach could really have better longer term outcomes for the community. So currently, for someone who wants to make a report, you have to write down a log for 14 days so you can take court action. but maybe if we change the focus of that service to have more of a focus on educating people about how to look after their animals, having a ability where you're able to build trust and relationships and support people, that way might be able to do things. So even though sometimes we've said for changing the same, sometimes they might be recommended for the future. Environmental services, we recommended that stay about the same, but we also wanted to ensure that those standards are met. Environmental services is like your food, health and safety thing, but we looked at children, health and wellbeing, and we recommended that this stay the same, but we also acknowledge that some of these funding comes from state or federal government and increases when your population increases, so some of these will get more income as your population increases. The community care and connections, we recommended more. For family sector, we also recommended that these stay the same, but maybe a change in focus, looking more on accommodating, more of a focus with students with disabilities in education and kindergarten settings, and looking at elderly and parts of the family to continue age support and existing programs. Bear with me as I just find the right spots. So with cultural venues, we recommended that this stay the same, but a change in focus. The reason for this was to have an expanded focus on broader spectrum of the community and organising and events. More focus on like some of the ideas were about educating people on what's on cultural events and libraries, encouraging businesses to utilise venues and provide opportunities for local community venues for bookings, and that do not have annual ones. We found it was sometimes really hard for community organisations to get into these venues. They book up really quick and they're really popular, but how do we make sure there's still that casual usage available? We recommended that council crossings stay the same, but looked at having a change in focus. Town planning was around the same. Guess there's lots of other ones that we've recommended as well that stay the same, but like, for example, economic development or inclusive employment, we wanted to look at how do those areas actually have more of a focus on creating a more diverse, inclusive. There's a lot of work happening in the culturally and linguistic space at the moment, which is really important, but we also wanted to look at how do we look at disability, how do we look at social economic areas, older people and ageism. I think there's a lot of diversity within the community, and we also need to help our businesses and our local community support and include those members. That's pretty much all we've come up with, but we're open for questions and you can ask us anything you want.
I think that's fine, Reece. The report has been read by the councillors and I think that it's quite an extensive one, so thank you very much for your presentation, both Reece and Cushy, certainly for contributing to this important plan and giving your time to present your report here tonight. I'd also like to thank the panel members who participated in the process and also the ones that are here tonight. Certainly the work that you've done is important and has helped shape the future of Wyndham's assets, so thank you very much. Councillors, I'll need to reinstate standing orders, so can I have a mover, please? Councillor Zetkowski, a seconder, please. Councillor McIntyre. All those in favour? Carried. Councillors, we'll now move to the motion or recommendation. And can I have a mover for this, please? Councillor Barrera. Seconder, Councillor Ramesh. Councillor Barrera.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, really, I support this recommendation to endorse the draft asset plan, the 10-year draft plan, and support the public consultation process from the 27th of April to the 25th of May. Really, I just want to thank the community members who contributed, who attended 5 sessions in total and took part in the deliberative engagement process, and there's many of them here in the audience tonight, which is fantastic. I think we were able to gather some really rich feedback from these sessions to inform investment in and management of council's assets now and into the future. I enjoyed hearing the feedback from the panel, and as the welcoming city portfolio holder, it was certainly, the diversity of the group was certainly music to my ears and to my eyes. I think with an asset base of over 4.7 billion and growing, our ability to fund the renewal of our assets over the long term is really impacted by the services and the levels of service that council provides. And I think our community participants, as I've shown again tonight, were able to look at those services which should be a priority, those which should stay the same, those which should or could be reduced. And they articulated clearly and consensually their priorities. They've done it again tonight, and I enjoyed hearing their rationale, carefully considered within an environment of competing needs and tight resources. So I thank the community members. Your work is certainly going to guide the management of Wyndham's entire asset portfolio for the benefit of the community now and into the future. And I'd just like to thank council staff who also attended all or some of the sessions. So thank you, and I look forward to the positive feedback following the consultation period. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barrera. Councillor Ramesh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd also like to extend my thanks to the members of the community here today to present the outcomes of the community panel consultation in person. It's very important that your voice is heard, and your feedback will certainly guide the future service and asset planning. The council has an enormous amount of assets to look after on behalf of the community. The Wyndham Asset Plan outlines what we have in place to plan for the management of our assets and shapes our investment in assets over the next 10 years in order to realize our Wyndham 2040 community vision. The community panel report has provided valuable insights in what might need to change with our community-facing services if funding becomes constrained, as we know that renewing our assets in the future will be expensive. Their recommendations will help guide our future service and asset planning, and I once again thank them for their time and effort in assisting with compiling this report. I support this very important plan to be released on public exhibition, and I encourage the community to provide their comments. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ramesh. Councillor, are there any speakers against this motion? Any further speakers for it? Councillor Marcus.
Thank you. I made sure that I made the time to go and be with the community members. I spent 2.5 days with them. We weren't allowed to participate, but it was very interesting to be with them, to just listen to them go through all of the assets and all of the other services that council do. I made some wonderful friends, and I see they're here in the gallery tonight, and it was just lovely to be with them, to hear. This is the first time that I think we've had such an extensive community come together to say what they think our assets planning should be. So to each and every one of the people that are here tonight, but also, and what was so good about it, we went from young through to older people. So we had a broad aspect of who was in there. So that's why I made the time to make sure that I was with them, because I love my residents and I'm here to work with all of my residents, to listen to them. I start at 8:30 in the morning this morning, and sadly I had to go, and I've got one girl crying her eyes out because there's no services in this city to help her. So this was what was so important, to make sure that we are listening to what our residents are saying. And I thank our new CEO, I thank all of our directors. I think you're doing a fantastic job. You are now understanding that the community want to be listened to. And I think the group we had were just fantastic. And I think they will now have a better understanding. And this is, I think, one of the issues that the residents don't really understand, the challenges that we've got, and, you know, the services we provide, the the roads and everything else. So I think what Reece said, about the residents not knowing, we've got to educate them better, especially with the animal and management. So, there's a lot of people that wouldn't know just exactly what the council is doing, and I think that's what we've got to do. We've got to have better brochures. We've got to have better ways of communicating, because with our older people it's coming through. I saw them all on Saturday at the Werribee races. Heather, you're not listening to us. We've got nothing in this city. And it was lovely, what they said tonight. They covered every age group. So thank you again. I enjoyed being with you, and I hope that we can continue to work together. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marcus. Councillors, any further speakers for this motion? Councillor McIntyre.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to again as well thank everybody for participating. I was lucky enough to join you a couple of times as well, and I just wanted to add, because I don't really want to go over everything that everybody else has said, because I echo those thoughts, but in the room, I loved the energy and the drive, and really what came across to me was the fact of people in the room really wanted to make a difference. They wanted to make their voice heard, and they wanted to make a difference. In the room, we had people who would maybe want to be future councillors and just really be part of that process and heard. So I just wanted to add my voice to the thank you, and your energy and drive and your enthusiasm as part of the process was very much noted. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor McIntyre. Councillors, any further speakers against? Any for? Councillor Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also want to echo some of the comment by my councillors. I also want to make it quick. I absolutely, same with Councillor McIntyre and Councillor Head Marcus, I really felt very inspired by our community members. I think it's 32, not 40, am I right? The report is 32, eh? So I'm just so inspired. I think we had the youngest, probably 12 years old, still doing VCE at 12. And I'm just so inspired by the energy in the room, the commitment of time, like 5 sessions, about 2.5 days, very long time. And just constantly, over the entire weekend, it was just a huge commitment. I really feel very thankful to the community for your passion, for your time commitment, for your energy. Your voice is heard. It's very important for you that you get involved in this. And also thanks to the council officers and the councillors who attended the session so that we can actually come up with a report for today. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. Councillors, any further speakers to this motion? Or recommendation, I should say. There being none, I put it to vote. All those in favour? Against? It is carried. Thank you. Item 6 is petitions. There are nil. Item 7, strategic report. 7.1, Learning Community Strategy 2018-23 Community Update 3. The report's on page 80 to 82. Recommendations on page 80. Attachments 83 to 91. Councillors, could I have a mover, please? Councillor Hill. Seconder, please. Councillor Barrera. Councillor Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As Wyndham's City Council's Deputy Mayor and Learning City portfolio holder, I'm very pleased at the key learning achievements and progress made through 2021 as described in the document. Our strategy supports us to pursue Wyndham's vision of a community where there is equitable access to education and access to lifelong learning opportunities, enabling and driving equity and inclusion. There were many significant breakthroughs and achievements in 2021, and I would just like to highlight a few here. Along with the state government, Wyndham City Council is planning to deliver 17 planned new and expanded kindergartens across our city between 2022 and 2029, considering there were like 120 babies across being born every week. And with the commitment of $47 million. We have also successfully secured Growing Suburbs Fund to build 5 community centres. Community centres is one of the most important shared learning facility in our city. We also continue to secure more public schools and to attract more independent schools across a fast-growing city. 2021 ended well with a significant highlight with Council, which Council is particularly proud of. Wyndham was awarded a UNESCO Global Network and Learning Cities Award. This award shows the resilience and the determination of the Wyndham Learning City and community to achieve its lifelong and life-wide learning goals, as well as highlighting the strong partnership amongst various learning institutions locally, nationally, and across the globe. The pandemic has opened new opportunities, and we have definitely seen how resilient our residents are in persevering through COVID and continue to adapt to new style of learning. In short, Council will commit to developing a diverse range of learning opportunities, thereby improving career prospects and, in turn, the emotional health and social well-being of our residents. Last but not the least, I would like to thank the officers for all the great work done for years in the past as well, especially for this report, for putting the report together. And just to note that the CEO had just promised me that the final format, when it goes out for publication, will include some nice graphic design and final edits. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. Councillor Barrera is the seconder. Would you like to?
Yes, please, Mr Mayor. Thank you. Look, it was really pleasing to read this update. There's no doubt Council's Learning City team does a great job, and it was no surprise to see the fantastic attendance at so many events, initiatives and programs during the third quarter. There's really so much I could talk about, but I only have 3 minutes, so I'll highlight just a few things. Firstly, let me highlight that Wyndham's continued global engagement and participation, and it was really pleasing to see Wyndham being recognised for its commitment to lifelong learning and being inducted into the Alliance's Hall of Fame. And I echo Councillor Hill's comments around the honour of becoming a recipient of the UNESCO Global Network of Learning Cities Award. Along with City of Melton, Wyndham was the only city in Australia to receive this award. And I think this really builds on the outstanding work and commitment that's been done over several years now by so many to build a learning city across Wyndham. Diversity and inclusion featured heavily in both the Learning and the Learning for Earning festivals, and I was pleased to see so many of our community enjoy speakers such as Shelley Ware, who shared her perspectives on Aboriginal issues, leadership development in Aboriginal communities and ways in which Aboriginal history, culture and learning can be embedded into broader education systems. And SBS, who discussed their inclusive recruitment processes. There's a lot we can all learn from that. A session on the topic of self-efficacy and belonging, and a professional development session on transport accessibility. The Learning for Earning Festival also enjoyed speakers who presented on best practice in applied learning. Tradeswomen Australia highlighted their work promoting diversity and inclusion for women and for girls. And Adult Learning Australia, Australia's largest national peak body for adult community education for over 60 years, workshopped an effective model of education for disengaged young people, so important in this city. So along with these, there was also the continuation of initiatives such as the Wyndham Education Roundtable, a mechanism for sharing information and engaging stakeholders to progress solutions to identified learning challenges. These are but a few of the people, the partners, the communities and the highlights that support lifelong learning and life-wide learning across Wyndham, and I congratulate everyone involved. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barrera. Councillors, any speakers against this motion? Any further speakers for it? Councillor Hegadich.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I actually wasn't going to say anything, but I just realised that the UNESCO award was in this report this evening, and I thought it was an opportune time to put on the record, Mr CEO, of the work that I know that the staff went above and beyond to organise the award for this council, and the work leading up to the actual ceremony itself. So I want to thank the staff for that, because I was mayor last year when the award was presented, and I know they had a big job ahead of them to make sure that we got that award, and thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Hegadich. Any further speakers on this item, councillors? There being none, I put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. Item 7.2 on the agenda is Jameson Way Community...
Mr Mayor, I intend to put an alternate motion.
Thank you, Councillor Barrera. Do you wish to read it out, or are you happy to accept it as provided?
I'm happy either way. What would people prefer?
I'm happy to take it as read, but it's
Mr.
your
Mayor,
choice.
I was just going to say I'd prefer it to be read out only because we have people normally that watch online who basically say it's not actually very clear. So
Okay.
That's the only
No
reason I'm saying
problem.
that.
Councillor Barrera, if you would
Sure.
then. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, so the alternate motion reads as follows: that Council not support the Jameson Way Community Centre and Master Plan in its current form for the following key strategic and operational reasons. The compact indoor sports component is inconsistent with the Council-endorsed sports strategy, which does not identify the need for such facilities in this part of our city. The compact indoor sports component is inconsistent with our internal infrastructure and service planning processes, and there is insufficient data and evidence to support the project. The endorsement of the master plan will further add to the significant deficit in public open space for Point Cook and the broader city, and is inconsistent with the principles set out in the open space strategy. The indoor sports component of this plan is not funded nor fully supported in our capital program nor our long-term financial plan. 2, amend the Jameson Way Community Centre and Master Plan to only show elements and stages which are clearly funded in both our short-term operational budgets and endorsed long-term financial plan. And 3, council officers develop and implement a communication strategy for relevant community members and interest groups outlining council's position as outlined in item 1.
Thank you, Councillor Barrera. Councillors, could I have a seconder, please?
I'll second it.
Councillor Hegadich. Councillor Barrera.
Thank you. Mr Mayor, I wish to outline the reasons for the alternate motion tonight to not support the Jameson Way Community Centre and Reserve Master Plan in its current form. There are a number of strategic and operational reasons that are significant considerations that form the basis of this alternate motion, and I really want to go through them. It's almost 15 months since the first draft master plan for this site was presented to Council after the Wyndham Sports Strategy 2045 identified opportunities to consider the future of netball, tennis and croquet at the site. Extensive service planning was undertaken to understand the needs in relation to sport and recreation for the site, and in addition, the community services and early years needs were also assessed. At some point, the idea of locating an indoor sports centre and even an aquatic centre on the site was floated, completely out of step with our adopted sports strategy. So in a long list of reasons why the master plan in its current form is simply all wrong, the first is that the compact indoor sports component is inconsistent with Council's endorsed sports strategy. That strategy does not identify the need for such a facility in this part of our city. The Sports Strategy 2045 provides a comprehensive, evidence-based approach to the delivery of sport and active recreation facilities across Wyndham, and it does so through the principles of best value for ratepayers' dollars, maximising participation, social impact and sustainable partnerships. In the development of the sports strategy, almost 2,500 residents, sports clubs and industry representatives provided valuable information about sport, active recreation and Wyndham's needs now and into the future. What happens to all that work? Do we really want to be saying to our community that we can change our mind at any time? Why bother to have such a robust strategic document aimed at all Wyndham residents if we're not going to use it, if we're not going to follow it? Now, not only does it not align with the strategy in terms of the location, it doesn't align with Council's model for provision. A single court would be costly and unsustainable. Best value for ratepayers' money, the sports strategy states. Council's current model of provision for indoor facilities is based on at least 6 to 12 multi-purpose courts that form part of a major facility. In other words, the provision for indoor facilities draws focus to larger centres where amenities and operational staffing are available to service such a facility. The current draft Wyndham plan
states that higher order infrastructure should be located in activity centres to support placemaking, catalyse investment and maximise community access. So the compact indoor sports component is inconsistent with Council's internal infrastructure and service planning processes. Separate parcels of land are nominated as precinct structure plans for indoor sports centres. Going outside of land allocations within Wyndham's PSPs takes land already allocated for other purposes, which takes us to Wyndham's open space strategy. The inclusion of an indoor sports hall is inconsistent with the principles set out in the open space strategy. Endorsing such a facility will add to the deficit in public space, not only for Point Cook, but for the broader city. Council has traditionally not constructed indoor facilities on open space, and in fact, Council's long advocated for the provision of more open space with the Victorian Planning Authority. And lastly, the indoor sports component of this current master plan is simply not funded. It's not fully supported in our capital program, nor in our long-term financial plan. Decisions need to be made in an appropriate way. We have a responsibility to act for the benefit of the whole community and for future generations, and we have a responsibility to heed the evidence base, and we have a responsibility to make prudent financial decisions. The alternate motion sets a precedent for following best advice, for heeding the evidence base, for not going against our own strategies, and for not allowing novel ideas to trump other carefully considered, planned and costed facilities. So let's amend the current master plan to only show the elements and stages which are funded in our short-term operational budgets and endorsed in our long-term financial plan, and let's communicate our considered position to our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barrera. Councillor Hegadich.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. When my ward colleagues first raised the idea of exploring a compact indoor facility at Jameson Way, I was somewhat supportive of the idea. In our discussions, I thought the concept of a small indoor hall catering for the Point Cook community was an opportunity for this council to think outside the box when it comes to the delivery of much-needed community sporting infrastructure for this part of our municipality. At our request, the council officers were asked to reconsider the preliminary master plan at Jameson Way to include an indoor facility akin to a school gymnasium or hall that could cater for things such as badminton, table tennis, dance and volleyball. The council officers prepared such a master plan, which was then released for public consultation, and for their work on this, I sincerely thank the council officers. Having now received a report from officers following the public consultation, inclusive of a recommendation by officers, as well as informal discussions I've had with my councillor colleagues, I welcome Councillor Barrera's alternative motion this evening. For me, Councillor Barrera's motion provides a definitive position of this council once and for all. I want to be clear, I'm very supportive of an indoor facility in Point Cook and agree the Hackett's Road project being a long-term solution without a fixed date of delivery is problematic. However, based upon the community feedback received, I do not believe an indoor facility at Jameson Way meets the community expectations and will not render a substantive outcome that is amenable to our residents. I was very surprised that the feedback received did not garner the excitement I thought the community would have had with council thinking outside the box by building a compact sports facility. I felt that the feedback mainly talked of residents wanting space for sports such as badminton and table tennis, but no real appetite for anything else except an aquatic centre. Insofar as there is a community desire for badminton and table tennis facility, I welcome the private sector's investment in this space. The need and want of an indoor facility in Point Cook will not and cannot be diminished by council building a hall. A hall cannot and will not remedy the overwhelming demand that is required for an indoor facility in Point Cook. In about 2015, during my last council term, council officers projected that around 2021, the council would have to make significant financial sacrifices. Unfortunately, this is one of those sacrifices that needs to be made. This council cannot invest any further in building a hall that fails to meet not only community expectations, but will have a financial shortfall of at least $2.3 million. To now support the construction of this compact indoor sport facility in Point Cook after community feedback and the officer recommendation and report is simply poor fiscal management by this council. I therefore call on my council colleagues to support Councillor Barrera's motion, as I will be doing, as her motion not only provides clarity with respect to this council's position on the project, but most importantly is good and proper financial management for this council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hegadich. Councillors, any further speakers for this alternate? Any speakers against? Councillor Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before I start, I would like to say that the word indoor has been mentioned 81 times in our sports strategy. If it's not an important sport type, why would it be mentioned so many times? Speaking about a couple of points Councillor Barrera mentioned about the Wyndham sports strategy, it's again some of the strategy. Wyndham sports strategy is due for a revision this year sometime, by the way. In page 35 of our strategy, the sports strategy, it says that the population health of Wyndham is inherently linked to the availability of and access to environment for preventative health and well-being. The sport facility network will consider this through the locations and setting of sport and active recreation, creating accessible, the word accessible is important, accessible places for the whole community. At the moment, community in Point Cook have to travel a long way to Eagle Stadium and Altona to play indoor sports. We had 373 community feedback. This shows a very successful engagement with our community. And I'd like to sincerely thank all the residents who took time to provide the feedback to council. Our number one stakeholder is our community. We are here for our community. This is our number one job. The strategies and policies are our guidelines. They are not our number one priority. Our priority is people. It's not the piece of paper. That piece of paper was adopted to serve our number one stakeholder, our people, our residents. This is also why we are here tonight. If you vote down this indoor sports centre, you are blatantly ignoring the needs of sports facility in our city. More importantly, the residents' voice is not heard. If you vote down this indoor sports centre tonight, you are risking the trust that our community had in council, because we had a community consultation and it's almost unanimous feedback. They want that indoor sports centre.
1 minute, Councillor Hill.
If you vote down this sports centre, you are voting against sports diversity in our city. If you vote down this indoor sports centre, you are voting against more communal spaces in our community, which would have encouraged social cohesion in our city. If you vote on this indoor sports centre, you are voting against the purpose of the sports strategy. The strategy is there to help us, to guide us, to make sensible decisions and not to limit and ignore the need of our community, which is so clear, so loud, and so transparent tonight, as stated in the feedback. As a Harrison Ward representative, especially in Point Cook, which always missed out on assets and infrastructure in the past, I believe you all heard that the residents have been asking for aquatic centre and indoor sports centre to that tonight for years. We all respect Councillor Barrera. I'll be voting against this alternative tonight because I hear the voice of our residents who are screaming for an indoor sport facility for years. If we decide to go against the voice of our community, what's the point of public consultation? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. Any further speakers for the alternate? None? Yes?
No, not for.
For the alternate.
Not for the alternate, no.
So is there any further speakers for the alternate? Councillor Marcus.
Thank you. Look, I think...
Councillor Marcus, if you use the microphone, please.
I think Councillor Barrera and Councillor Hegadich have summed this up very clearly. The council officers have been put through a lot of extra work, but there's no point in building something that's not really going to be fulfilling for our community going forward. Point Cook have the largest population of any suburb in this city, so it is the fastest growing at this stage at the moment. So if we're going to do something, let's do it and do it well, as we heard from our residents sitting in the gallery tonight. I'm not sure that the numbers listed here on page 95 of the report, I'm not sure that that's a good number of residents that have had community consultation with it. But what I'm really concerned about is that the funding is of today, and we may not be building this for another 2 or 3 years. We are not out of the woods. We have a very tough road in front of us. And I'll just bring to your thing, Moody's look as though they will be reducing the credit rating of this state government, the only state government in Australia. And that means that there's 162 billion in debt now, which could go with the new tunnel they're building to 400 billion, and it will grow and grow. I'm not prepared to put this council into debt just because we want to put something else there. Let's plan it. Let's make sure that what we're building is right for the community, and so that they can be proud of their facilities. But just speaking with all the business people, if it wasn't for the business people of this community, there'd be many, many more businesses have gone broke. So we have to make sure that this council is prudent, as Councillor Barrera said, in spending our ratepayers' money. What concerns me now, if the credit rating for the state government is dropped, that means we may not get the grants. The federal government, $1 trillion in debt. It's got to be paid back sooner or later. I do not want to see this council going into debt either. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marcus. Is there any further speakers against? Councillor Mahfood.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The reason why I'm not supporting this this alternative motion is for a number of reasons. One, there is a deficit of indoor sports facilities. I do take on board some of those points that Councillor Barrera made. And yes, we do have a strategy. We do have a strategy that outlines, you know, what we should be doing, where we should be putting our money. We would like to see an Eagles stadium in every suburb, but we can't do that. We would like to see another Eagles stadium. We just simply can't do that. So and also looking at the distance that some people have to travel to get to these larger venues. I mean, there's a need for indoor stadiums. Why not spread some of these out? Why not have a few smaller indoor venues throughout the municipality? Also, this is a master plan. This is not shovel ready. This is not a detailed design. It's simply a master plan. And if we just knock it off now, it's completely by the wayside. I don't see a problem with keeping it in there at the moment. There'll be times within the next few budgets that we will look at this and whether or not we can afford this. There might be a point that we can't. But to simply scrap it now, I think just sort of goes against this whole consultation process. Going on the consultation process, you look at the amount of submissions for the particular components of this master plan. The highest is for the indoor sports venue, 287. So 287 submissions were for that. You look at from the highest to the lowest. Surprisingly enough, the lowest is only 41 retention of open space. And I'm more for open space. We need more open space. I would never like to impede our open space. Sometimes open space isn't used. It's simply not utilised. It's simply not utilised to its full potential. It might be a pocket of open space that just sits there by the side of a building. I think this is using that open space. It's not taking too much away from the overall plan, and it's something that will definitely receive a huge amount of use. So for that, Mr. Mayor, I'm not supporting this alternate motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mahfood. I did notice your hand, Councillor McIntyre, but Councillor Zatkowski had his up first. So,
Mr. Mayor, it's actually just a point of clarification.
Yeah, hang on. I just wanted to. Go on. Sorry, clarification.
Yeah. Before
I ask for a speaker against.
Yeah, no, that's okay. So just point of clarification. If this alternative motion is supported tonight, does that mean that this master plan is scrapped and that we go back to the drawing board, go through another consultation process with an alternative plan?
Mr. CEO.
No, my understanding is that the former master plan with the exclusion of the indoor playing facility would then be adopted, is part of this motion to be adopted.
Do we then present that plan back to the community though for feedback?
No, we've been through the feedback process. This is the council decision-making process tonight, so
Great.
no.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Zatkowski. So, are there any other further speakers for this alternate? None. Any further speakers against? Councillor McIntyre, I should say.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I completely disagree with the amendment proposed by Councillor Barrera. The current recommendation is for the Jameson Way Community Centre and master plan to be staged in line with affordability in the long-term financial plan. It further goes on that the indoor sports facility is to proceed subject to the practicalities of staging and when funding is secured. This amendment takes away this option for it to even be considered. Not delivered, but considered. We asked the community what they thought, and I'm paraphrasing officers when they said the community loved it. We consider new projects all the time as part of our long-term financial plan. It's a live document, not a set and forget document. The open space reduction here is 0.16 of a hectare, I believe, looking at council officers' thing. The open space strategy, and I've reread it, talks about not just the figures of land being available, but what the value and the quality of that land is. How do residents view that land? And whether the land here could actually be used better. I believe it can. Strategies are guides, and council officers, of course, give us their best advice. We have the option to adopt, accept, or reject officers' advice, as we see regularly in this chamber, either through alternative recommendations or in the planning committee meetings. We also have the option to bring in notice of motions, which a number of councillors around this room have brought to drive change or policy in a certain area. I respect council officers' advice, but I've been elected to be a voice for my community to advocate for their needs and the wider needs of the Wyndham community, and that's what I'm doing here. That's why key decisions are made by us, not councillors, and it is important that the community can see with transparency who voted for what. The sports strategy, as we know, was created in 2017 and is due for review this year. As we know, much has changed in the last few years. To reiterate as well that the Wyndham plan, which Councillor Barrera referred to, is actually draft in relation to those activity centres, and it's not actually been passed yet by this council. So to reiterate, I believe this alternative motion just seeks to restrict our ability to act and ignore the strong community voice. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor McIntyre. Councillors, any further speakers for this alternate? None? Yeah. I was about to get against. Any further speakers against? Councillor Ramesh.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I agree with the comments made by Harrison Ward councillors Hill and McIntyre and would like to also repeat and point towards the high volume of active community responses garnered on the compact indoor sports facility. 287 responses suggest a highly engaged, interested and excited community underpinning the decision made by this council to expand the consultation plan in the first place. Going by statistics, as pointed out by Councillor Mahfood on the average number of responses received previously by the council, and as advised by our council officers, this is an extremely good response, a unanimous response in their own words. I do not intend to be one of the councillors who today will explicitly vote against the wishes of our community that has been loudly voiced in today's report. I will not be supporting this alternate motion. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ramesh. Councillor, any further speakers for this alternate? No further speakers at all? Okay. Councillor Barrera, as you move an alternate and there was speakers against, you now have the right of reply.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, just to sum up, I reiterate this alternate motion tonight addresses a number of reasons why the master plan in its current form should not go ahead. Despite what's been said tonight by some, the facts remain, and the facts are it's inconsistent and completely misaligned with a number of key council strategies, policies and positions. The sports strategy, 2045, not just 2017, 2045. I did say the draft Wyndham plan, I'll say it again, the draft Wyndham plan, Wyndham's open space strategy, the long-term financial plan, our capital program, our operational budgets, our infrastructure and service planning processes. If that long list's not enough, then there are other key issues too. in relation to the visual design of this sports hall and the disconnection from the current built form that has already been highlighted that could create safety issues. In addition, there are other options that have still not been fully explored that could offer viable alternatives to the particular site and still meet the ideal of the 20-minute neighbourhood. Doesn't stack up in its current form. There are significant cost inefficiencies with locating a compact indoor sports venue on this site. I understand 287 responses that are welcome said that they would like to see this, but 287 out of 300,000 people who live in this city is not the significant number that we're hearing. In fact, of the people who answered that question, what do you like about the proposed design, there were a further 306 over other categories that said they wanted the outdoor space. 306 wanted outdoor courts, outdoor spaces for activities, open space. 306, slightly higher than 287. And 2,500 who said what they wanted to see in our sports strategy to 2045. So it's just misleading to say that we're not listening to the voices of our residents. What about the 2,500? What about the other 306? It's also misleading to say that the sports strategy refers 80 times to indoor sports halls. Of course it does, but it talks about where they should be located in a responsible way, not an irresponsible way. I'm not surprised that most of the Harrison Ward councillors would want this. Why wouldn't they? I am surprised that a Chafee Ward councillor, I wonder what the Chafee Ward councillor would give up in Chafee Ward so that this sports hall, against all good advice, has been suggested. So, look, to sum up, to finalise, we've got a responsibility, someone said it, I think it was Councillor McIntyre, as elected decision makers to act in the best interests of our community. This sports hall doesn't do that. By reverting to the previous master plan, yes, we're acting for the benefit of the whole community and for future generations in an environment where we're constantly having to balance growing community needs with restricted revenue and tight budgets. We just can't simply afford to waste money on a thought bubble. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barrera. Councillors, I now put it to vote. All those in favour of the alternate? Geez, I almost said 7 there because there's 2 screens. Thank you, councillors. All those against? Oh yeah, 6. Can't count. The alternate is lost.
Mr. Mayor, could I call for a division, please?
Yeah, call for a division. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I thought there was an echo there, so I'm quite happy to do that. Councillors, all those who supported the alternate, please raise your hand again. So for the alternate were Councillor Marcus, Councillor Hegeditch, Councillor Barrera, Councillor Gillian and Councillor Shaw. Against? Councillor Mahfood, Councillor McIntyre, Councillor Hill, Councillor Ramesh, Councillor Maynard and Councillor Zatkowski. Councillors, given that the alternate is lost, I now would ask for a mover of officer's recommendation, Councillor McIntyre, a seconder, Councillor Hill. Councillor McIntyre.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted first of all to thank officers and especially the community for their large response to the draft master plan. We heard from the community in the creation of the council plan how important these spaces are. Our municipality at that point was split into 4 areas, not ward orientated. The only area that listed as their priority of an indoor sports facility was Point Cook, Williams Landing, Laverton and Laverton North. I cannot believe the number of people across the community who have said how excited they are about this project and the sense of anticipation. A recent visit that we had in the Point Cook village, near to Jameson Way, we had a number of residents ask me afterwards what was happening and if they could do anything more to help. We know that this is appealing across the sections of our community with old and young alike. We know we should take all the opportunities that we have to look at what is presented to us and whether what things can be done better or differently. COVID has taught us to be agile and think creatively, especially things like land and money, which are finite. The plan for the project is to be staged in line with the long-term financial plan, which is reviewed regularly. The master plan looks at a holistic approach and includes in the community centre reserve and associated infrastructure. We know there are large gaps in our kinder provision and funding is available from the state government, so it made sense to look at these elements together. A third kinder room is included and reconfiguring and updating the internal spaces, plus relocating and expanding the sports pavilion components. For those who know the site well, you'll know there is a container on site to try and deal in part with the issues that the current sporting groups are facing. The proposed compact sports centre is around the size of a large sports hall, so a basketball court size or the equivalent of 4 badminton courts. Plus, it would have a sprung floor, which will make it accessible for dancing and performing arts. We hear so much in our chamber here about what we are providing for our seniors, and this is an opportunity to have that facility very close by to some of our main retirement villages. There will also be better parking and paths. We know our community loves to walk, and creating more spaces that it can use for dancing and other art forms and not just formal sports is important. We know that the current indoor sporting provision for Point Cook is not planned to be delivered until outside the next 10 years. This gives us an opportunity for an element to be addressed in the meantime. As we know, there's already $418,000 in the budget for the planning, and I'm excited to see what will come of this in fruition. Funding of the overall plan, of course, would be subject to the long-term financial plan, and it's great to see we have anticipated funding of some grants and potentially developer contributions. I'm looking forward to seeing the detailed plans and for this to be built for our community. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor McIntyre. Councillor Hill is the seconder. Would you like to speak?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I would like to reserve my right to speak.
Councillor Hill. Councillors, any speakers against the motion? Councillor Barrera.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I won't repeat everything I said. It's already on the record, but I can't support a motion that seeks to go against the evidence base, go against everything that we've been told, and that's really fiscally completely irresponsible. So I'll not be supporting it.
Thank you, Councillor Barrera. Councillors, any further speakers for the motion? No, any against? Councillor Gilligan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I sat and observed the debate on the last item because quite often it appears that it's some that are for and some that are against certain things, but I thought that we had a good, robust debate, which I suspect will have demonstrated to the community all that we need to know about the circumstances that govern this council over the course of this term, and the questions that the community must rightly ask about how it is that a majority of councillors could vote for a project of this nature, despite the overwhelming evidence against a number of policies demonstrating it is in contravention of the most sound and commonsensical approach that we should be taking on this project. I would simply ask my colleagues, Councillor Marfoot and Councillor Sikowski, what are we cutting out of Tarneet, Hoppers Crossing and Werribee to fund this single court indoor sports facility? And I agree with Councillor Barrera on that aspect around the importance of being accountable to the community and being accountable to the people that elected us here, and not necessarily thinking about it in a different way around what perhaps is in our collective personal interest, but more broadly what is in the best interests of the city. Finally, there is a report that has been circulated to us that talks about the unsustainable operation of the indoor sports facility, something that Councillor Barrera didn't get to touch on because she had 5 minutes worth of content, and she probably could have gone on for another 5 minutes about how much of a lemon this project is. But that does in many respects demonstrate why good decision makers making principled decisions based on the evidence before them is so important when it comes to making sound economic decisions within our community. And I do want to commend Councillor Hegetich, which would not have been an easy decision to be a Harrison Ward councillor and oppose that project. But I do think it's worth acknowledging her tonight on the comments that she made. Principled decision making, looking at the issue on its merits and making the right call. So I'm opposed to this and for the very reasons that I was in favour of the alternate resolution that were eloquently put by the mover and the seconder. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gilligan. Councillors, any further speakers for the motion? Councillor Mahfood.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just in general discussions too, of course this is not in my ward, I'm a Chafey Ward councillor, this is in a Harrison Ward. We don't look and only vote and only put up things in the budget or only support things that are in our ward. I have the understanding of the Jameson Way and the wider Point Cook community, how they feel about this and how this would definitely support them and definitely add value to their social life or their physical life. And I see this as a very worthwhile project. It's not something that's, you can say it's not, it's inconsistent with our strategies. If we were to follow every line into every strategy, we could sit there and pull out so many things within our budget that we're going to put up tonight. There's inconsistencies. The strategy is there, it is to guide us. It is, but it isn't. This is not something that has totally going against our sports strategy. So to pull out a few lines here and there and saying this doesn't go. This is something that's inconsistent with this strategy. Well, there's some parts of the strategy that is consistent with. And like I said earlier too, it's not a clear cut. This is not a clear cut argument that you could make. I find this is a very worthwhile master plan. It's something that's, like I've said earlier, I'll say the same thing again, that it is not fully costed, it's not shovel ready, it's not a detailed design. It's something that may not even be built into the future. But leaving it on the master plan at this point in time, I do not see any issue with that. So I'm supporting this original officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mahfood. Councillors, any further speakers against?
Yeah.
Councillor Mashaw.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I find it interesting that we've gone to all this trouble and yet there's a councillor making a comment that this may not even be built in the future. I don't understand that thinking, to be honest, but master plans are generally there to guide our budget and decision making. I have to admit, this is what am I coming into 6 years, 7 years on council. This is the first time an actual capital works project of this magnitude has been endorsed by a majority of councillors that did go against a number of policies and strategies that were outlined by Councillor Barrera. So I just want to put on the record that this is the first in my experience that this has happened, and I know there's been a lot of debate as part of draft when this was going out to draft, and of course at this moment, and certainly as part of other discussions as well. So I do think it is important to put that on the record that this is the first time that this has happened in my experience. And when we say they're there to guide us, they certainly are. They're there for a reason. That's why they come into the chamber. That's why they're endorsed, because they're there to ensure that we all make decisions in the best interests of this community, and those policies and strategies are there for a purpose to do that. I also do think it's interesting that that time and effort that went into the sports strategy, a strategy that was led by and endorsed by the Mayor when he was the sports portfolio holder last term as well. And I do find that surprising that we aren't we're not following certainly our own strategy in relation to sports in this way. So I won't be supporting this. I know there's been a lot of work that's gone into it. I thank council officers for their time. I thank the community
1 minute,
for giving
Councillor
us
Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to thank councillors, council officers also for the work that they've done and for the feedback that we have received from the community. I do want to also thank Councillor Barrera and Councillor Hegeditch. Your arguments I fully supported and were well thought out and well articulated. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. Councillors, any further speakers for the motion? Councillor, you've already spoken. Oh, you did, sorry, I beg your pardon. I wrote reserve beside it and didn't read it. So, Councillor Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've spoken my many reasons before this master plan draft went out for community consultation a couple of months ago. I'm not going to repeat that tonight. Councillor Barrera mentioned about evidence-based. There was significant evidence that we've seen tonight in the report, the feedback from the community. We had 278 residents out of 373 feedback received, which unanimously asking for multipurpose hall. Council's feedback in history, even for annual budget feedback in the past, has never received such high feedback, if I'm not mistaken. Even if this is still a very small number in comparison with our population, but our council is getting much better now in engaging with our community. Is like what we heard tonight with the deliberative asset plan. To Councillor Gilligan, yes, we are elected by our ward residents, but we are making decisions for the entire city. If this is in your ward, I might also be supporting it as long as there is enough evidence of such high engagement.
Councillor Hill, can you just keep your points directed to the matters raised, not the councillor, please?
As long as there is evidence of such high engagement of our community feedback. With the rapidly changing needs due to the population growth in Point Cook, we absolutely need this indoor sports centre. Just over the last weekend, I've met with community members who struggled to get more opportunities to play sports. I've also witnessed that they have been more and more competitions running to play badminton and table tennis. For example, the only commercial badminton centre in Truganina is completely fully booked. This multi-purpose hall is not just for badminton, by the way. It can also be used for many other things such as dancing and art. Under the most recent Local Government Act asset planning principles, the top one priority out of 5 was community engagement. Another one of the 5 principles states that council must deliver services that are equitable,
Councillor Hill.
accessible, good value, and meet the needs of the diverse community. It is a $3 million or a roughly multi-purpose hall which caters for indoor sports that can be used 24/7 if needed, for badminton, for table tennis, for dancing, for art, and many more. It is really a good value and it meets the need of our diverse community. There is a public transparency to this motion tonight. Just to put in context, sorry, I'll just cut it short. This is tonight. I'm going to vote for this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. I think everyone has spoken. Everyone, Councillor Hegeditch. My apologies. Against.
Thank you. I refer to my comments that I've previously made, and I will not repeat them per se. But I will note and reiterate my concerns that this compact sports hall will not meet the community need. And in fact, of the residents that were surveyed, 141 said exactly that. Under the topic of what are you concerned about, 141 people said not meeting community need. And 61 of those residents stated the overall cost of the project is something they were concerned about. I'm certain that of the residents that said that they liked the hall, of course they did. If I was asked at a consultation if I liked it, of course I'll like it. But we are here as trustees of the assets of this municipality, and that includes the council funds and the financial consequences of the decisions we make. So again, reiterate my position that I do not believe an indoor facility at Jameson Way meets the community expectations and will not render a substantive outcome that is truly amenable to our residents. And to this end, I again raise my concerns that supporting this motion is poor fiscal management by this council, and I urge my colleagues to consider this when voting.
Thank you, Councillor Hegeditch. Councillors, are there any further... Any further speakers before I go to right of reply? No? Councillor McIntyre.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Sorry, I was jumping the gun there.
That's okay.
Thank you. In light of the fact we've obviously had the amendment to now, in relation to any additional information, I just wanted to reiterate that the 2017, so the Sports Strategy 2045, but it was done in 2017 and it's due to be revised this year. So irrespective of the Title IX, it isn't supposed to be in place to 2045. And I would suggest the population and the desire and needs of our community has changed quite dramatically in the intervening time periods. And I think the main key thing that I think when I'm listening around into some of the comments about poor fiscal management or different elements like this is that this is not funding the sports hall. What this is doing is making it part of our discussion to look at in relation to funding as part of our long-term financial planning. It doesn't commit us to delivering it. What it commits us to do is considering delivering it subject to, as I'd said earlier, in relation to staging requirements and funding. So thank you, Mr Mayor. I would take the time there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McIntyre. Councillors, I now put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried.
Can I
Division?
call for yep.
Yeah, I thought you might. All those against? Oh, sorry, yeah, well, doesn't matter. We'll go for 4 first. Councillors Mahfood, McIntyre, Hill, Ramesh, Maynard, Zatkowski against. Marcus, Hegeditch, Barrera, Gilligan and Shaw. Thank you, councillors. Councillors, item 8 on the agenda is Policy and Advocacy Reports 8.1, the Australian Local Government Association National General Assembly Motions 2022. The report is on pages 113 to 116. The recommendation is on 113. There are no attachments. Councillors, can I have a mover, please? Councillor Barrera, seconder. Councillor Hegeditch. Councillor Barrera.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Look, last year I had the opportunity to attend the Australian Local Government Association National General Assembly virtually. The event was really an opportunity to engage with and to hear from other local governments, more than 500 of them around the country, on a range of issues and an opportunity to influence national policy and future directions of councils and communities. And last year there were over 100 motions voted on, ranging from financial assistance grants to the environmental impacts of artificial turf to even ratifying the treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons. Motions also included Wyndham City's motion to work with local governments across the West to roll out place-based employment programs, which was successful. So Wyndham's got a really strong track record in this area, a record of advocating for the needs of its communities to all levels of government. And this year, there are 2 important motions being put forward. Motion 1, tree planting and revegetation, calling on the Australian Government to provide additional funding for tree planting to increase tree canopy cover, reduce the impacts of climate change, improve biodiversity and create habitat for native fauna. And Motion 2, to increase funding for the community, arts and culture and sports infrastructure, calling on the Australian Government to increase needs-based funding in these areas, because we know that tree planting and increasing tree canopy reduces the heat island effect, reduces extreme heat events, and we know that community, arts and culture and recreational infrastructure play a critical role in building strong communities and promoting a welcoming city where everyone can belong and participate in something they enjoy. Importantly, these 2 motions have been developed based on feedback from the community, from their views, and I look forward to hearing the debate in June. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barrera. Councillor Hegeditch is the seconder. Would you?
No,
No?
Councillor Barrera said everything.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, any speakers against this recommendation or our motion? Any further speakers for it? There being none, I put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against, the motion is carried. Item 8.2 is state election priorities. The report's on page 117 to 119. Recommendation is page 117. Attachments 120 to 132. Councillors, can I have a mover, please? Councillor Hegadich. Seconder, Councillor Mahfood. Councillor Hegadich.
Nothing to say except that this is the council's state election priorities in regards to what we want to advocate to the state government, with East Werribee being our top priority. And yeah, look forward to the mayor and the deputy mayor and the CEO working with the relevant candidates in due course, and hopefully we'll get something somewhere along the line. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hegadich. Councillor Mahfood has been a seconder. Do you wish to? No?
Yes. Yeah, well, Mr. I'll say a few things. I think it's a real it's a great document here. I think we could ask for everything. We could have a list that would go for 1,000 pages long, but we've been very careful and considerate. With an election coming up, obviously it's a good time to sort of speak to both sides of politics and ask for those the needs. I'm not talking about the wants, I'm talking about the needs of our city. It's such a growing city, and you look at some of the things in here. Councillor Hegadich summed up one of our most pressing ones, East Werribee. That's something that cannot seem to be hanging in the balance. More buses. I've don't know how many times I've been contacted regarding the bus services within this city. Yes, they've come a long way in the last 5 to 10 years, but there's more is needed. When people are waiting 40 minutes at a time for a bus, when the buses aren't quite getting out to those newer areas, and people having to walk further than what they would normally have to walk in a more established area, I think it's not acceptable. Looking at some of the other big ticket items, especially when you're looking at our community and sports infrastructure, I can't go through the whole list here. It's still a bit of a list. It's not, like I said, it could be a list a mile long, but it's still a bit of a list here. Money go towards our performing arts centres in Tarnee, the Riverdale Aquatic Centre. These are some of the big needs that our city needs, and the state government really needs to come to the playing field and start contributing more to this growing city. So I think this is a very, very carefully considered request, very carefully considered document, and I fully support that tonight, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Mahfood. Councillor, any speakers against this motion? Any further speakers for it? Councillor Marcus.
Thank you. I brought this up last week that there's nothing in there for health. And I've had more people come to me when they knew the problems that I encountered about getting people to hospitals and being seen by doctors. I still ask the council officers, please, to put something in there about the health and doing something about Werribee Mercy. I had a meeting with Dr. Garra yesterday, and he said it is in dire straits. I've had other people that have been sitting up there 4, 5, 6, 7 hours, and their son came from Geelong and said, Mum, I'm getting you out of there, I'm taking you to Epworth. She was seen within 1 hour of getting to, and this is what we're hearing. So if we're not going to put it in here, I'm going to get a campaign up to talk about how we can do something about the health services in this city. Because my sister, 11 hours, from the minute she fell to the minute she got back to her accommodation, that is unacceptable for an 86-year-old lady. And it's coming through. All the residents are ringing me all the time. So we need to make sure that we're putting in there, like we've got for schools, like we've got for families. We've got it here in here about our families. There's nothing about health for them. Health is one of the most important things. Our aged care, it's not quite at crisis point, but people that are living at home are just not getting the services that they deserve. And I've got a whole lot of people that are out there looking after people. As I said before, a beautiful young girl coming to me tonight before I left here. I should be home with her. She's got no services. So please, council officers, look at health. Health, I believe, is number one. If we haven't got good health services, we haven't got much at all. The people come first. So I would like to make sure that we put this in here, that we want something done about the hospitals. And we've got a private hospital, but that's not getting good wrap up either. So what is it that we cannot get good health services in this city. It's gone on for 30, 40 years.
Thank you, Councillor Marcus. Councillors, any speakers against further? Any speakers for? Councillor Gilligan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. This is an exciting report that really does talk to the prioritisation of important infrastructure projects, whole of city projects in the city of Wyndham. Whilst EWEP is an important project, some 60,000 jobs to be created within the city of Wyndham, another key aspect of this document is making sure that we secure state and or Commonwealth funding for the Riverdale 1160 Sayers Road aquatic facility. I must say after tonight, though, I am concerned about the ability of council to set aside these frameworks and policies and fund projects that are not merit-based. That is why these types of documents to reinforce these projects are critical. We need to ensure that Riverdale gets the appropriate funding, and I don't see a Point Cook aquatic facility in any form in this document. In relation to another important project, it is of course rail. And we know that the Sayers Road train station is critical to the hundreds of millions of dollars of economic output that we can achieve through the A-League soccer stadium and the broader precinct. That is why this station is the #1 station that is recommended in this document. These projects have met against priority frameworks and against merit-based evaluations. And I do think that each and every measure over the course of this council term, I will articulate these points because I need to ensure that the community continue to stay focused around the decisions that we make in this chamber and the ability of these projects to not ultimately get the prioritisation that they deserve. That is also why I oppose the long-term financial plan decision of this council to cut
Councillor Gilligan.
million away from the Riverdale aquatic facility from 100 million to 75 in the long-term financial plan. Nevertheless, it is still a project that is the next off the cab in terms of aquatic facilities in Wyndham. So I endorse this report. I'm glad to see these projects are prioritised, the right projects that deserve funding, and I look forward to holding the state to account over the forward 7 months to go. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Gilligan. Councillors, any further speakers against? For? Councillor McIntyre.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm broadly in favour of the detail here. Definitely in favour of the headings, especially the development of East Werribee. We need those local jobs. We need the Western Intermodal Freight Terminal in Truganina. And we also need better planned schools. We have here in Harrison Ward one of the biggest schools in Victoria. I believe it's the second largest with having one campus. The others have more campuses and has to run numerous timetables for children to even have the area to be able to play. So restrictions on things like the number of portables as listed here I think is important, but things like enrolment zoning is not listed. We also have whole suburbs here in areas like Williams Landing with no schools at all. And the Schools for Wyndham is looking for that feasibility study that needs to happen. We do need, as Councillor Mahfood had mentioned, more buses with 9 of the top 20 bus routes here in Wyndham. And we do need more community and sports infrastructure. I don't necessarily believe that the Point Cook indoor sports facility is the right one. Councillor Gilligan obviously referenced some of those that are listed there. We do need more and better accountability, so it's great to see that growth area infrastructure contribution. Our developers pay, but they're often not. The work is often not done, and the money's not spent in the areas required. Which is like where we have issues like Point Cook Road, which is single track in many places. And despite the fact that I attended a consultation in Lincoln Heath South in 2014, which explained that that the state government was planning to duplicate the road between Sneeds and Dunnings, that this still hasn't happened. So there's some key things that need to happen and have impact heavily on the livability sustainability of our area. We have the opportunity more than ever this year to have that clarity about what we want to ask for, especially with the realignments of some of the new seats, and potentially to have a potential marginal seat here with a newly defined Point Cook seat, which includes parts of Hobson's Bay and Werribee South. We know from history that marginal seats often have more money spent on them. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor McIntyre. Councillor, are there any speakers that haven't spoken that wish to? Councillor Hill.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm also broadly in favour of the headings of this state priority document. Most of the major issues in Wyndham are state issues. Most of the residents who approach me present to me lots of issues that actually belong to state issues. In particular, transport, more frequent buses, more bus routes, more reliable and frequent trains. People are not using train not because they don't want to, because trains are not reliable. That's from a feedback from community. And I definitely strongly supportive of these some of the headings at the East Werribee Precinct. The second one, Western Intermodal Freight Terminal. As most of us here are aware, the federal government had recently announced their $740 million budget for the Western Intermodal Freight Terminal in Truganina. So that was a big win. But the further advocacy is to ensure that the container run on the rails, not carried by the trucks from a port to Melbourne to Truganina. Westgate Freeway and Princess Highway simply could not cope with more trucks anymore. I assume that they are not doing it like this. So also definitely more community and sport infrastructure and better connected neighbourhoods. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. Councillors, I now put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Motion is carried. Item 9, Strategic and Town Planning, there are nil. Item 10, Other Reports. 10.1, Informal Meeting of Councillors. The report is on page 133, commences on page 133, recommendation on 133, attachments 134 to 135. Councillors, can I have a mover, please? Councillor Ramesh. Seconder, please. Councillor Hegadich. Councillor Ramesh.
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Hegadich? No. And the speakers both for or against? Being none, I put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. 10.2, Adoption of Wyndham Governance Rules. The report's on page 136, 138. Recommendation on page 136. Attachments 139 to 175. Councillors, can I have a mover, please? Councillor Hill. Seconder, please. Councillor Mahfood. Councillor Hill.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I am pleased to support the adoption of the revised Wyndham Governance Rule this evening. As noted in the report, the Local Government Act 2020 requires all councils to adopt governance rule to ensure the effective management of the council meetings. The recent review has resulted in minor yet important amendments to provide greater clarity and consistency with the Act. The process enabled input from staff, councillors and the community, and also incorporated a legal review of the rules. In particular, I would like to thank the officer for inserting the new section under Rule 69, and the chair may remove, which correspond to Rule 67 in our current governance rule document. While I appreciate that the Act supersedes the local government rule, our local governance rule simply cannot contradict the Act. Otherwise, the situation in last month's council might repeat again due to confusion. Our current governance rule 67 under the chair may remove states that the chair may order and cause the removal of any person other than a councillor who disrupts any meeting or fails to comply with a direction given under sub-rule 66.2. While the Act said the opposite, that the chair state the opposite, that the chair can remove a councillor who disrupts any meeting. The proper conduct of our council meeting is vital to good governance and decision making, so I'm pleased to see the adoption of these updated rules. Council's standing orders must be brought in line with the Local Government Act 2020 to ensure good governance and integrity of the chamber. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. Councillor Mahfood?
No, thank you.
No? No. Any speakers against? Any further speakers for? Councillor Gilligan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I think I'm very excited to see the mover in favour of the resolution after so much conjecture and debate around the merits of a number of these rules. It's great to see that councillors, at least the mover and the seconder, are now in favour of them as a whole. The important part, I think, worth mentioning, of course, we often talk about community feedback. There was just one person that thought that all of the huffle and the puffle was worth it in terms of the chamber debate around whether councillors should have 3 or 4 to constitute a special general meeting. It really does show that there are councillors around the table that have their finger on the pulse of the issues that really matter and those that don't. And I'm glad to see that reflected in this report in terms of the fact that only a single person, perhaps a political activist as opposed to a community resident, has responded. But overall, I think this document is always difficult to administer any governance document if you don't have the right environment. And I certainly think that's worth acknowledging. But certainly from my point of view, this is ultimately, at the end of the day, an important part of where we're moving, and I vote in favour of the proposed resolution. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Gillian. Councillors, any further speakers against? Any further speakers who haven't spoken at all? There are none. Thank you. I put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Carried. 10.3 is Portfolio Committee Report. The report is on page 176 to 177. The recommendations on 176 and attachments 178 to 84. Councillors, can I have a mover, please? Councillor Ramesh. Seconder, please. Councillor McIntyre. Councillor Ramesh.
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor McIntyre. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to add, we had our portfolio meeting last Thursday. It was too late for these minutes, so they'll be included next time they're reported, obviously, at council meeting. I did also want to point out the council are now part of the police neighbourhood policing model, the community safety model, and we met here in the council chambers on the 23rd of March with a variety of stakeholders. The police currently also have a community sentiment survey which closes on the 31st of May, and appeal to the community to contribute as it's used as one of the measures of success. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor McIntyre. Councillors, any further speakers for the motion? Against? There being none, I put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. 10.4 is the proposed annual plan and budget 2022-2023. The report is on page 185 to 195. Recommendation 185 to 187. Here's my attachments 196 to 380. Councillors, as previously advised, Councillor Barrera has declared a conflict of interest in item 1. So I've separated that in the motion into 2 parts, and firstly I'll call for a mover and a seconder for part 16 of the recommendation once Councillor Barrera has left the chamber, which he has. Councillor Hegadich. Seconder, please. Councillor Mahfood.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor. I'm, as much as I'm putting my hand up and
Yes.
doing that, can you actually explain which of the items she has?
I believe it's part 16 of the recommendation, which I believe relates to
the proposed fees and charges listed in
fees.
2022-23 to be considered. She's got a conflict in that. Thank you.
Correct, yes. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so Councillor Hegadich, you've moved, so you should speak. Yes, no?
Yes, I'll speak to say that any comments I'm going to make will be made with the rest of the agenda.
Which is, yeah, fair call.
Yeah, thank you.
And Councillor Mahfoud was the seconder.
No, thank you, not on this one.
Thank you. Any further speakers, both for or against? There being none, I put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against the motion, or that part of the motion is carried. Have Councillor Barrera back, please. Thank you, councillors. I'll now call for a mover and seconder for the remaining budget items being 1 to 15 and 17 of the printed recommendation. Councillor Ramesh. Seconder, please. Councillor Hegadich. Councillor Ramesh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm very pleased to support this draft budget tonight. I'd like to thank the community, residents of Harrison Ward who shared their ideas with us at the pop-up sessions earlier in the year. I'd also like to thank the council officers for their hard work to get the budget to this stage. We heard from our community that they want a budget that gets back to basics, one that creates pride in our city by planting more trees, providing better transport connections, and caring for our parks and open spaces by keeping them clean and well looked after. With a capital works budget of 168.2 million and 445 million allocated to programs and services, this budget delivers on those. I'd like to highlight a few important projects being delivered for Harrison Ward as part of this budget. There's 5.4 million for a community centre in Truganina, which will provide much needed services to local residents regardless of age and stage. 3.2 million to implement the master plan at Laurie Emmons Reserve, 2 million for greening the pipeline, and 3.3 million to implement the master plan at Brookdale Reserve, and funding for design works for upgrading Ashcroft Avenue. As our community continues to grow, it's vital that we ensure that it remains livable, providing services and facilities that our community wants and needs. We must also be mindful that we are financially sustainable so we can continue to deliver for future generations. COVID has been particularly hard on the community and its businesses. This budget signals better days ahead, underpinned by a council that cares deeply for its residents. I'm proud to support this draft budget, and I look forward to hearing community's thoughts over the next month. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ramesh. Councillor Hegadich.
I'll reserve my right of reply.
You're right to speak. I only meant what you stood. That's all good. Councillors, any further speakers for this motion? Councillor Marcus.
Thank you. I will be abstaining tonight because this is going out to community consultation. There's many things in the budget that I'm not happy about. I've not received all the replies for the questions I sent in. So until I get those, the submission that came in from Werribee South, not happy about that one. And the others that came in from other members that have not been answered or included in this budget. So I will now abstain and come back once I've had my replies, and also to see what the community have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marcus. Councillors, any speakers against? Any further speakers for? Councillor McIntyre.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too want to echo the other thanks that have already been said of the residents that came to speak to us, as has already been said, and submit their suggestions to the annual budget and plan. Your thoughts and feedback are obviously very important, and it was rewarding to hear so many of you reinforcing our advocacy asks, and I understand you will receive some direct feedback if we have your details to do so. Parks and open spaces, better roads, there's footpaths and cycleways, and a real emphasis on, as Councillor Ramesh has said, getting those basics right. Having a city that's clean and tidy and one you're proud to call home. When you look at the activities, which obviously are come under there within the budget, things like reviewing our local laws, developing a litter strategy to tackle litter and dumping, including blitzes that tackle litter and presentation issues in problem areas across our municipality. To me, I'm hearing loud and clear that we want the presentation of our municipality better, and people are proud, want to feel proud of where they live. And I believe this budget, in relation to what it says and in relation to its initiatives, looks to deliver that. As a community safety portfolio holder, delivering year one of the Building Safer Communities programme initiative is in here as well. That's important in empowering our community to lead issues of local concern for them, enabling residents to feel safe where you live and also proud to call Wyndham home. The review of the hardship policy, I believe, will be done before these rates are issued this year, so it is relevant that there is the appropriate support and communication of our residents in place. At this point, obviously, we're voting for it to go out to consultation, and I'm happy for it to go into consultation and actually hear what our residents have to say. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor McIntyre. Councillors, any further speakers against? Any further speakers for? Councillor Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I would like to also thank my fellow councillors and the CEO and council officers for the extensive work and effort to prepare the draft 22-23 budget for council that is being considered by council tonight and then be put on display for community feedback. There have been a big program of work with community engagement and input, development of council plan and the long-term financial plan, and then the confirmation and update of the 22-23 budget position and community requirements. Although not all requirements can be funded and delivered for all suburbs, there has been good discussion on priority and capacity and provision of information to inform my decision-making. Our community feedback is extremely valuable, and I'm just so impressed. I think a lot of these feedback are very, very important for council to further consider. So I would like to, look forward to meet our community during the public exhibition pop-up events, the 9 of them, that we have this little card here, going to be distributed to communities. I look forward to engage with the community over the coming weeks for this annual plan and budget, including the 9 pop-up sessions that I just mentioned. As we have witnessed tonight, council do listen to our community's voice. I'm definitely looking forward to meeting and talking to our residents and receiving feedback from our residents. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. Councillors, any further speakers against? Any that haven't spoken that wish to? Councillor Gilligan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. This will be a good opportunity to hear community feedback, but it's also important that we continue to have an ongoing conversation with the community about the challenges that we face. One of which is, of course, the cost escalation that is going on across the assets right across our city. We're seeing massive increases on general maintenance costs as we acquire more and more assets that are gifted over to us. And ensuring that we're explaining this to the community in a rate-capped environment is critical. On services, we need to have a conversation with the community that requires a bit more guts than we are now. Recently, I was doing some media around the fact that we've got a $10 million gap for child and maternal health services. Should we stay in this service if the state is not prepared to fund its fair share? Or should ratepayers have to pick up a 70-30 bill? On the point of services, we also know that we're taking more and more of the school supervisor crossing costs, which means there is less to do other services. As Councillor McIntyre and I regularly refer to, city amenity is critical, but if you don't have the frontline workforce to be able to deliver, then ultimately all we say is words rather than meaningful actions. On the point of employee costs, it is a good example of the challenge that we face. The overall cost of employees across Wyndham City Council is higher in terms of increase than the net increase of rates. This demonstrates the challenge we have as part of the services review to get this right and to have the right people in the right location. And I'm very confident in our CEO who is doing that alignment work to make sure that that happens. But these are the real bread and butter conversations that are important to have.
1 minute, Councillor Gilligan.
Making sure that they're aware that we can't fund everything and that we are talking about this in the context of the state and Commonwealth's fair share. Finally, I think it is time for us to commit to an annual intergenerational report that goes alongside this budget to better explain the tax gap and the infrastructure gaps in our community. Quite often we talk about all of the great infrastructure that we need, but we don't do enough to explain why we don't have it. And by doing that, reinforcing an evidence-based argument, by having that intergenerational report sitting alongside the budget, we can explain this in terms that the community can better understand. And that's something I'll continue to advocate for during this term of council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gilligan. The councillors being all that have spoken, I now put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? And we note Councillor against, and we note Councillor Marcus is abstaining as she's indicated. So the motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. We're up to now. Okay. 11 notices of motion. There are nil. 12 council seal. 12.1 council to staff instrument of delegation amendments. The report commences, or it's on page 381 to 383, recommendation on 381, attachments 383 to 474. Councillor Nova, mover, please. Councillor Hegadich. Seconder, please. Councillor Mahfood. Councillor Hegadich.
Nothing to add except that this between this and the next report are ones that will constantly keep coming up before this council, so it's just tabled. Thanks.
As a result of the new act, we believe?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you, Councillor Hegadich. Councillor Mahfood.
Nothing, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillors, any further speakers for? Against? There being none, I put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. Item 12.2, Instrument of Appointment and Authorisation under the Planning and Environment Act 1987. The report's on page 475 to 478, recommendation on 475, attachments 478 to 480. Councillor Canova, mover, please. Councillor Mahfood and seconder, Councillor Zatkowski. Councillor Mahfood, no. Councillor Zatkowski? Any speakers for this motion? Against? There being none, I put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. Item 13, questions with notice from the public gallery. Mr CEO, are there any questions this evening?
Yes, Mr Mayor, we have a number of questions this evening. The first two questions are from Mr Shane Coburn of Tarneet. Question 1 from Mr Coburn is widening of Hopkins Road. Why has this road not been widened between Doherty's Road and the Western Freeway? A new trucking, Mr Coburn starts, I am constantly seeing an excessive amount of council staff doing gardening, cleaning, especially on Tarneet Road. Why does council think it's okay to use 9 staff members to clean the centre of Tarneet Road, which is approximately 2 metres wide? Staff costs, traffic management costs. These works are happening every 2 weeks, which is unacceptable. Surely this work could be subcontracted out at a cheaper rate to the ratepayers of Wyndham. Or can't most of this work be carried out by Corrections Victoria, by people who have to do community service work? Or, even better, can't the flowers in the centre of Tarneet Road be replaced with something more manageable that requires less maintenance, meaning less ratepayers' money spent? So thank you again, Mr Coburn, for your question. If you're happy, Mr Mayor, I'll provide a response. The number of staff required to maintain the centre median is determined by the amount of work and the time available to complete it. Often this requires a large number of staff to complete the work as quickly as possible to reduce inconvenience to road users and reduce the cost of traffic management in place for the safety of workers. The frequency of maintenance works is determined by how quickly the grass and the weeds grow in the median strip. The work needs to be done by suitably trained workers, and Council regularly assesses the cost effectiveness of services to ensure best value for the community. The landscaping of Tarneit Road is intended to make this major thoroughfare attractive whilst not requiring excessive maintenance. It is a constant challenge, and we are faced with seasonal challenges as well. Obviously, there's more growing happening in the warmer months, Mr Mayor. And our final question, Mr Mayor, is from Lisa Heinrichs. Lisa's question is about election signage. Yesterday, the community of Wyndham has been bombarded with illegally and dangerously placed election signage by the UAP. I'm sure this won't be the only instance of it. Will Council be removing these signs? In what time frame will they be removed? Will it be done on the weekends as well as weekdays? And will the offending parties, candidates be fined for every single sign placed illegally? And what is the amount of the fine? So in response, Mr Mayor, Council has commenced and will continue to remove and impound these signs. We're getting quite a collection down at the Works Depot as we speak, Mr Mayor. This will happen where officers see signs and or when they're reported to Council. So if any member of the community is concerned about signs illegally placed on Council property, please let us know at Council and we'll be sure to get someone out there to collect that sign. Council's local laws make it an offence for a person to place any advertisement on Council land. Where Council is able to prove the identity of a person placing election advertising signs, enforcement action can be taken for each sign placed. So we hear you, Lisa, and we are responding.
And I suppose, Mr CEO, to also reflect that any of those that are not on Council land, that are on Vic Roads land, will be removed by NetFlow.
That is correct. And again, we're in regular dialogue with NetFlow, so we can certainly pass that information on.
And there was a reason why we read out the questions without checking if those people were in the chamber.
Yes, Mr Mayor, given that we are in this transition from the COVID years, and we're seeing more people come into our gallery, and it's really great to see people in the gallery this evening. I guess the custom and practice has been that the questions are only read out when people are in our gallery. But I guess during this transition phase, and it's entirely up to you, Mr Mayor, how we do this, but given the volume of questions tonight and the fact that we are still transitioning out of the COVID environment, I think it was appropriate, and that was the direction you gave me, so I'm happy with that.
And the fact that one of the people that asked the question was given the information that it would be read out even though they're not here, which is normal practice to ask if they're here.
Correct.
Thank you. Councillors, item 14, urgent business, is nil. Item 15, confidential business. Councillors, can I have a mover, please, to close the meeting to the public? Councillor Hill.
To close the meeting, Mr Mayor.
And you're quoting pursuant to section 661 and 2A of Local Government Act, as it's stated in the report. You're most welcome. Councillors, can I have a seconder, please? Councillor McIntyre. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Good. Councillors, item 17 on the agenda is close of meeting. I now declare that the meeting is closed at 9:07. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.